This is a 6 Feet Up production. In this video, 6 Feet Up's Chief Technology Officer, Calvin Hendricks Parker, demonstrates several open source alternatives to Microsoft SharePoint, including Plone, Karl, and Alfresco. The real-world examples provided show how SharePoint can be replaced or even surpassed in the enterprise.
Hello and welcome to the SharePoint Alternatives webinar. My name is Calvin Hendricks Parker and I'll be guiding you through this webinar about open source technologies that can compare very similarly to some of the functionalities you might find in SharePoint. If you're watching this webinar and wanted to participate online in various services such as Twitter or Facebook, please use the SharePoint Alt hashtag, then I'll try and keep that on all the slides. And I'm happy to answer any questions. My contact information will be at the very end of the webinar, so if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me or contact me via one of the various social media networking sites such as Twitter or LinkedIn. So a little bit about me. My name again, Calvin Hendricks Parker. I'm co-founder and CTO of 6 Feet Up. We are a sophisticated web project company, but my background definitely lies in open source. I've been involved in open source communities since the late 90s. Also in being very involved in the Plone Foundation, which Plone is one of the technologies I'll talk about today. I was the former president of that foundation. And just in general, have a strong interest in a lot of the enterprise software, especially on the open source line. Our company, 6 Feet Up, we were founded in 1999, originally in the Bay Area, but then moved back to Indiana, where I'm originally from. We definitely focus on more sophisticated web projects, not your smaller sites. And the more intricate the business requirements, the better. And we try to bring open source technologies into areas that they've never been before. And we're very proud of the fact that we're a certified woman-owned business. So today I want to try and make sense of the alphabet soup that you may hear about when talking about enterprise content management or web content management. A lot of these terms are used when describing SharePoint or some of the other software that I'll talk about today. And other things that may describe SharePoint would be document management and some other tools that revolve around knowledge management. So you've kind of covered all these various acronyms that are listed here. Right now, the environment of enterprise content management is primarily dominated by SharePoint, but you have other commercial competitors in the space such as Documentum or the Oracle Web Center. But when it comes to SharePoint, it's probably the most widely used, and it's also probably one of the most expensive enterprise content management systems out on the market today, depending on the size of the organization. The pricing can get actually quite complicated depending on the type of licenses needed and the number of client access licenses or server licenses that we would actually need to deploy a SharePoint environment today. And also keep in mind with the various levels of licensing, not all the features are included in the base level of SharePoint. Some things are left out, such as fast search or access and info path services that are typically part of the higher end SharePoint packages. Now, when you're looking to deploy some of these softwares, you also need to keep in mind with the commercial software, you're going to need to have fully licensed staging environments as well. So whatever you're deploying to production, you're going to need to have at least as much in licensing for your staging environments. So why would you actually care to look for alternatives? I mean, the number one reason may actually be cost. Time to implement some of the SharePoint implementations can be quite lengthy. And when you're looking at SharePoint, you're buying into an entire Microsoft stack. So this comes down to cost again. You're looking at licensing for everything from the Microsoft server up through SQL Server to the internet services such as IIS. And then you're looking for alternatives such as the ability to have larger files than 2 gigabytes. Currently, SharePoint has some large file limitations. So if you're looking for more flexibility, looking for alternatives is a good reason to start looking around. SharePoint also requires a lot of hardware for medium to large deployments. So depending on your current needs, you may actually need more hardware and horsepower to run that deployment than you'd previously thought. Out of the box, SharePoint is fairly rough and really is more of a platform to build upon and to satisfy your business needs. But I don't think everyone always goes through the full effort needed to customize SharePoint to satisfy the needs of the whole business. As far as usability and the browser experience, sometimes SharePoint, like I said, is kind of rough as far as out of the box, but it also has a heavy download for the end users of CSS and JavaScript. And it also has some cross-platform limitations where some of the features still rely on ActiveX controls, which may not work properly in some browsers such as Firefox on a Macintosh. So the area I want to focus on is looking at open source. Even if you don't know it, there probably is some open source in your enterprise today. A lot of the embedded systems, things running such as routers or switches, your voice over IP systems, a lot of those systems today are using open source software behind the scenes. Even storage appliances, a lot of the embedded systems are going to be a Linux or a BSD based type system. Another reason to consider open source obviously is as cost control, especially in today's environment of a recession. It's more prudent to look for things that are going to fit more within your budgetary needs. And right now, competition in this area is actually driving a lot of need for differentiation, and a lot of innovation is actually happening here, probably faster than you're going to see in some of the commercial offerings that are out there. So let's talk about the various alternatives today. I've got 3 products that we want to go over. Right now, Alfresco, Plone, and Karl are the 3 I wanted to focus on. Alfresco is probably one of the largest open source enterprise content management systems that are out there right now today. Plone is one of the oldest and most stable open source content management projects that exists. And then Karl, which is probably new to most folks who are listening to this webinar, but Karl is actually a new up-and-coming platform. It had its roots in the Plone and Zope community, but it's very fast and very efficient and very easy for end users to use and for you to deploy onto various servers. So we'll go over Karl pretty extensively at the end here. The Alfresco project started in 2005, and you can compare Alfresco very directly with other commercial products such as SharePoint or Documentum or the Oracle Web Center content systems. They're more enterprise content management with probably a heavier emphasis on document management or document repositories. Alfresco is built in Java and uses a lot of the Tomcat and Spring plus many others. It's kind of a who's who of Java frameworks all put together. The newest versions including things like Solr for search, which is really nice. And actually we use that with some of our other Python-based products as well. But Alfresco offers you 2 versions. There is a community version, which is the open source, free for you to download and try version. And then there's the enterprise version of Alfresco, which is a commercial offering which gives you support and some access to some additional features. Today I'm going to focus mostly on the community version of that because we really want to talk about open source software here today. And there's lots of people who are using Alfresco out there, and these are just a couple examples of folks using Alfresco out in the wild. But I do want to talk a little bit about Alfresco Enterprise. So just briefly, we'll cover Alfresco Enterprise. It is the latest release of Alfresco is version 4, which was released in January 2012. Alfresco Enterprise version typically lags behind the community by a few months, depending on the release cycles of the community version. It can be fairly expensive, depending on your needs. The pricing for Alfresco's Enterprise starts around $15,000 per year per CPU on the back end, and then front-end nodes can be around $3,500 per year per CPU on the delivery tier, and they go up pretty quickly from there. But the benefit of the Alfresco Enterprise is you're going to have certified and supported releases. You'll have full access to their support staff and other certified consultants who can help you out with your Alfresco needs. So if that's a consideration for your organization and you're looking at open source technologies but still need to have certified releases, Alfresco Enterprise may be a better match for you. Now the Alfresco community, which is the open source version of Alfresco, the V4 version 4 for that was actually released in October of 2011, so a few months prior to the enterprise stable version. At that point in time, the enterprise stable version was version 3.4. So Alfresco community is going to include a lot of the new features that will be coming out in the enterprise version, so it's kind of a sneak peek or early release versions of what enterprise is getting. So a lot of those new features get tried out here in the community version. So things like the Alfresco Explorer, which is probably more the traditional view of Alfresco, will be seen here. The new share interface was released in version 4. There's also the web quick start for creating communities really quickly. There's Sharepoint integration in Alfresco, which is really nice. You can actually interact with a Alfresco instance as if it was a Sharepoint backend from your Microsoft Office tools. And Sharepoint now includes a new workflow engine called Activity, and the JPBM workflow engine is still installed, but it's hidden by default. So if you're upgrading from a version 3 into 4, you'd still have the older JPBM version. The new Activity BPM is included in version 4, and the old JBPM is still installed but hidden by default. So those upgrading from version 3 would still have the older version of the workflow engine available to them, but then can start using the newer version of the workflow engine as they move forward. So let me give you a little demonstration of the Alfresco Explorer interface. This is the more traditional Alfresco interface. You've got your task lists where you can actually review workflow items that are assigned to you. So here you can see the workflow edit interface. We can go into the company home and actually view the document repository in a hierarchical fashion. So we can actually go into the document library for a specific area and see the files that have been uploaded into the repository. The next interface I want to show is the new share interface. So you'll see it's a little more of an updated UI, looks a little more modern, and this is going to show off the new site creation wizard. So we can actually, from the pull down of the share interface, create a brand new collaboration site. We can give it a description. We can choose the type of site we're going to create if we had set up multiple profiles for different sorts of sites. And then we can choose the visibility on whether it's public or private. Once the site's created, it'll be available to us inside the interface. And from here we can actually customize the look and feel of this site and customize the types of tools that are available to us in the site. So adding things like wikis and blogs and link sharing is actually very easy to do inside of Alfresco. There's actually a drag and drop interface to add those various tools or types of content into this site specifically. So we just added a blog and a wiki to our collaboration site. We can then go into the wiki and add new pages very easily just from the click of the button. So this is an area where Alfresco is fairly simple to use. It gets a little more complex when you're dealing with the document library and various metadata, which I'll show off in the next area here. So we just save our wiki page. And we can go back to the site dashboard, and this is where we could actually track changes to content that's happening inside the system in real time. So here we're going to show uploading new content into the document library or the document repository. So we'll go over to the repository. We'll actually go into one of the folders. And from here it's actually quite easy to integrate with your existing file manager. You can actually drag and drop right onto the web page. Alfresco also supports Windows sharing, also mounting up the directories via other network file sharing technologies. And then from here we can actually go inside of one of the pieces of content that we've uploaded and see all the various metadata options. And right from this gallery screen we can actually see all the options that are available to us. And that grows even further once we actually load up the content item itself. We get a nice preview of the piece of content, and then we can edit all the various metadata and properties about the content or send it into a workflow. So in version 4 of Alfresco, we've got some new features that are available. The primary focus of version 4 was on scale and social channel publishing. So there's actually the ability to workflow publication of content from Alfresco up into Facebook or Twitter or to your blogs. So you can actually create and author the content in Alfresco and then push them to various sites in a nice controlled fashion using their workflow. The Solar search engine has replaced the integrated Lucene indexer, which allows you to do some nice things as far as scaling the search. You can actually run search on a separate process from Alfresco itself. And then, as I mentioned earlier, the activity workflow engine can now actually be run side by side with the original JBPM workflow engine. Alfresco has some interesting options, such as a nice mobile app. So there's a native iOS mobile app that's available, and it gives you direct access into the various sites that you can create through the share interface. Alfresco has some a nice cloud option for those who don't want to deal with hosting on their own. And they just released recently, earlier this year, the Alfresco add-on market. So there's a lot of third-party add-ons for Alfresco that are easily available through that market. As far as the pros and cons go for Alfresco, it is definitely a very flexible platform. And that may be a con as well, depending on who you are and what you're looking to do. But it gives you almost an infinite amount of flexibility for building intranet applications, which I think is probably key here, because you will be building an intranet application. The out-of-the-box experience is very complicated to use and probably not recommended because it's going to give you far too many controls for most users' needs. The other cons of this Alfresco solution is that the commercial support is really only available to those who have licensed the enterprise support. You're kind of out on your own as far as certified support unless you're on an enterprise license with them. Next technology I want to talk about, or software, is going to be Plone. Plone is actually a project started back in 1999, which I think in internet terms is a very long time ago. It was originally founded by three guys, Alex Leamy, Alan Runyon, and Vidar Anderson, who basically all got together over the internet. Some of them were in the US, some of them were in Europe, and decided that they needed to build a CMS on top of the then popular Zope application server. That was the first release was in 2001, and it was basically a usability layer, made the Zope content management framework much easier to use. There was basically a toolkit available at the time that allowed you to use Zope to use it as a CMS, but it wasn't terribly usable. So Plone's initial release was basically a theme on top of that made it very easy to use. Plone is currently licensed under the GPL v2, and in certain specific modules it's licensed BSD for reuse. One nice thing about Plone as compared to a lot of other open source projects is the community put in place a software conservancy model in 2004, and with that they put the Plone Foundation in control of all the intellectual property and trademarks, which got transferred to the foundation at that point in time. So they have a entity and a group that's sole purpose is to actually protect and promote Plone, which differs from some other organizations which may have a single person owning the trademark and the IP, and you're kind of at their whim. That you've probably seen this before in the past with Mambo CMS forking to Joomla due to some disputes in their community. So we hope with Plone to try and avoid that by putting in place the foundation. There are a lot of users of Plone. It sees a lot of widespread deployment in universities, these other various sectors. Also, nonprofits is a big area where we've seen a lot of Plone deployments, probably mostly due to its power and flexibility, but also the fact that it's open source, so the licensing is very easy for them to accommodate into their budgets. The latest release of Plone is Plone 4.1. 4.2 should be coming out in just a couple weeks. 4.1 was released in February of this year. It has some nice new things as far as a new look and feel. The visual editing is using TinyMCE, so if you're familiar with software like WordPress, that uses a TinyMCE editor out of the box, and so do we. So people who are familiar with that tool should also be very familiar with Plone. Plone gives you a powerful search with full text indexing and advanced search options out of the box, with nice add-ons to drop in support for the Solar search engine, the same search engine that Alfresco supports. That can be actually added on afterwards. Now, some of the real power with Plone comes in with its fine-grained roles and permissions. It's actually probably a feature hard to be matched by many commercial or other open source systems, where it gives such flexible control over who can do what, when, and where, and a lot of that is controlled via the workflow system. We even have things like a placeful workflow, which allows you to alter permissions and on roles by area of the site. So in certain areas of the site, pages can act one way, in another area they can act another way. So you can actually create a very easy to use extranet and intranet inside of a publicly facing site. And Plone out of the box supports content versioning and staging. So I just want to give an example of how easy it is to actually create content inside of Plone. So in this case, this example, we're going to create a photo gallery inside of Plone. So we'll first create a folder. So you can see that the edit interface for Plone is very simple. We're doing it all in context of the content itself. Here's an example of the workflow options that are available to you for an admin user. From this area of the site, we can then actually connect to our site via WebDAV. So Plone supports mounting up, like basically via web folders, your folders inside the site. So here's the gallery folder via my WebDAV browser. A local computer, and I'm going to grab some photos and just drag and drop them over into the Plone site. And we can see them being uploaded into the site. And as they're being uploaded, Plone's actually rescaling the images into multiple scales such as thumbnails or previews or full-size images and storing all that into the database for us. We can very easily change the landing page display of a folder, and we've got multiple options available here, but we can make a thumbnail view of a photo gallery very easily. And if we want to take that a step further, we can actually turn this folder into a slideshow, and then it'll use a jQuery powered slideshow to basically give us a nice little transition for slideshows between all the photos we just uploaded. So you can see here's the automatic transitions with fading. We can have some control over the timings here through the UI. If we actually wanted to change the order of the slides inside the slideshow, it's just as simple as dragging and dropping the items in the contents view, which is basically a folder view of your content inside the site. We can rename the images very quickly all at once. We can rename all of them all at once if we wanted to, change the titles of the images, change the short names, which is nice to have control over short names for things like good SEO. So I'm just going to go ahead and change the first 3 titles here. And once we go back to the slideshow, you'll see that now we've got picture 1 right on top of the slideshow for us. Now if we wanted picture 3 to actually be the first picture inside the slideshow, we would just go to the contents view. We can drag picture 3 to the top, and we click view, and now you'll see that picture 3 is the first picture of the slideshow now. So very easy to control. The next thing I want to show in Plone is actually staging content. It'd be really nice to be able to check content out, leave a live copy of our content online, while we have a private version that we can edit at our own will. So here I'm actually editing the privately staged version of our content. So I'll add a line of text here inside the page. And Plone supports versioning of the content as well as staging. So each time we save the content, it'll save new versions of the content that we can then see the history, roll back to previous versions of the content. And we can actually add notes in here so that when you're looking at the history, you can actually see what's been changed over time. So I'll click Save, and now we've got the new piece of text right here in the content. If I go over to an anonymous view of the site and I refresh this page, you'll see that the published version of this page is still live and we don't have the new line of text. Now if we go back over to the site where I'm editing it, and we run this through our standard content publication workflow, you can see where it goes into publication preview. We get a review list portlet. So if I'm a reviewer and I log in, so this is an example of a reviewer logging into the site with just a reviewer permission. They have the ability to see that review list and then go and actually publish the content or send the content back with comments if needed. So now the content's been published, but it is still staged and not actually pushed to the public site yet. So in this case, as an admin, I would come into the site, see that my content's been published, and then I can check in the content So if I'm working on the working copy, or if I'm working on the main copy, I'll go to the working copy, check it in, or I can cancel the checkout. I put in a message just like I would if I was editing the content, and then click check-in. And now if we go over to the anonymous view of our site, where we're not logged in, and refresh the page, you'll see that the new change has then been pushed into the public space. Now we can look at the history of the content, and this is what I was talking about earlier. We can see all the changes that have happened to the content over time. We can compare between two versions of the content and easily roll back to previous versions if needed. We have a nice audit trail set up, allows us to see all the changes, who made the changes and when over time. Plone also includes some nice tools for doing social, such as blogging or integrations with Twitter and Facebook. So this is just a folder contents view of a blog, but we can change the landing page view to now be the blog view, and we get a much more blog-like looking view with the content embedded into the folder listing with images. We can actually add some portlets to the left and right that would be more blog-like. So I'm going to block the portlets coming from the root of the site. I'm going to go ahead and add in the tag cloud portlet. We will add in some configurations here for that. Just take the defaults. And then we'll add in the the monthly archive, so we can see per month the number of blog posts that have been posted. And we'll go ahead and add in a Twitter portlet, so we can actually link this to my Twitter account and see my 5 most recent tweets. And these are all part of a third-party add-on for Plone called Blogstar. So now if we go view our blog, we'll see our new portlets over on the right-hand side, and we're all set with our blog. So some of the pros and cons of Plone. Plone is a very mature and stable product with an active community. Some of its focus has been on ease of use for the end users. So the people who are on the ground and actually contributing content and trying to collaborate inside the system have been the main target for Plone over the years. Now, one of the downsides may be that the out-of-the-box experience can be fairly complicated. With any kind of CMS, you have just got lots of machinery and mechanics going on behind the scenes. There's lots of knobs and tabs and drop-down menus, just due to the sophistication of a content management type product. The next thing I actually want to cover is going to be more of a knowledge management tool. This is the new one called Karl. Karl originally started in 2008, and it was based on an idea that they implemented in Plone, but they found Plone was too heavy for most collaboration needs when you're talking about a knowledge management and knowledge discovery tool. The Karl project itself is owned and funded by the Open Society Foundation, which is George Soros' nonprofit. They have been kind enough to develop this tool in the open source space, and it's built in Python, so same platform as Plone. But it's built on top of the Pyramid application framework. Pyramid is now part of the larger Pylons project, but it was initially built by people who were very familiar with the areas of Zope that aren't so nice. So Karl is taking the benefit of all the maybe missteps along the way from the Zope environment, but Karl itself is a very up-and-coming, Pyramid itself is a very up-and-coming application framework that abides by the philosophy of you only pay for what you eat. So it tries to stay out of your way as much as possible. Karl itself is open source, released under the GPL v2, and it also has Pyramid underneath, which is released under a BSD-like license. And currently the Karl organization, OSF, is currently evaluating moving the software and the intellectual property of Karl to a software conservancy model very similarly to what Plone did back in 2004. Currently, Karl is in widespread use by a lot of nonprofits, such as Open Society Foundations, Oxfam, Eurasia, and United Nations. But some of the big features of Karl, it tries to stay fairly simple in what it offers, but Karl has the concepts of offices and intranets. Your offices and intranets, you can manage files, you can have office-wide calendars, you can actually deploy documentation very, very easily. And once you get beyond offices and intranets, the main collaboration areas are going to be in what are called communities. Communities have these basic tools that comprise them, which is the blog, the wiki, the calendar, and the files. And what's really interesting about Karl, I think, is the email integration that's been done. So it's easy to interact with the blog or files over email. You can actually just email into any of these tools that are inside of a community. And then the communities themselves will also email out to all the members or the people who are members of those communities latest versions of those pieces of content. For example, if there's blog posts, you can actually have a threaded discussion over email and never actually have to log into the web interface. And a lot of that was done because Karl tends to get used in some areas where there may be some bandwidth constraints and people may not have access to very reliable bandwidth, and so email may be the key tool for them to actually do a lot of their collaboration. So Karl has concepts in it such as feeds. You can actually view feeds of content just like you would view a Twitter stream. It tries to simplify the users and groups and roles and workflow down into the concept of staff, which are anyone who is part of the organization, affiliates, who are people who are invited to collaborate in the various communities. It's very easy to actually invite outside people from the other organizations to collaborate inside of a Karl community. And then each community can have the concept of public or private. And in the private case, only people who are members of that community would see that community inside of their Karl interface. So even if you're staff, you wouldn't have access necessarily to see the private communities unless someone who's part of that community invited you into the community as a member. And then in each community, you can create your own communities very easily inside of Karl with a one click of a button. And then you can establish your moderators. So it's a little more self-governing. It doesn't require a large provisioning effort from administration to put forth new communities. So I just want to give you a quick tour of Karl's offices and communities. So right here we're actually in an office landing page. You see we've got some portlets down the left and the right that can be easily customized for that specific office. But the area in the middle of the page is typically global to the whole organization. So it's very easy to publish information across a whole organization, yet keep certain areas of the site customized to just specific offices. If we go into a community, we can see we've got wikis, blogs, calendars, and files that are available to us. We have very few buttons available, which is nice. They're very easy to find and navigate through. Creating new blog entries is very, very simple. As you can see, there's just really one button for creating a blog entry there. And if we actually wanted to look at the files area, it's a very simple file manager. You have the ability to multi-upload files into that area. So just like we did with Alfresco, we can drag and drop files from our file system right to the web page, and then it uploads them with a either Flash or HTML5 runtime uploader. So you can see here we uploaded 4 images very quickly into the site. And there the new files are. So very easy to use, really meant for people who aren't web people as their day job. They're really here to collaborate and communicate with each other. So the next thing I want to show inside of Karl is the feeds and search. So I had mentioned the Twitter-like feed of content earlier on in the concepts area. So here we can see those files that I just uploaded into Karl are available via this feed that basically self-updates every 30 seconds. And we can see other content being collaborated throughout the site by all the various members of our organization. And you can filter it down by just the communities you're involved with or just seeing your content as well. Karl includes some really nice features as far as a live search. And it gives you this faceted results, very similar to like a spotlight search on OS X. So it gives you the top couple results for each type of content. But then you can actually go dig further by going to the full search results section and then narrowing down by specific facets there. So looking for content that was created within a certain time frame, certain types of content, or content that was created by a specific person or had certain keywords associated with it. So if we're looking for just blogs, we could click on the blogs facet and see all the blogs that contained my name inside the blogs. Now I want to show you how easy it is to actually invite other affiliates from any other organization into your Karl instance to collaborate. So we can click on the invite new. All we need is their email address. We invite the person with their email address, put it in here, and give them a little message about, the fact we want to collaborate with you. They'll get a very simple email inside their inbox with a link that directs them to log in. And once they do log in as an affiliate, the only thing they would see inside of this Karl instance would be the communities that they've been invited to. So you can see that we can actually establish who the moderators are very easily. We can even view tags on a per community basis. So you've got tags at a more global level, but then we can actually see down at the community level, you can filter down further with tags. Karl has got a lot of potential. It's growing very, very fast. One of the things that will be coming up in the next few weeks is going to be a completely new user experience for Karl, which I will show off here in just a second. There'll be some new features that 6 Feet Up's been developing for Karl, such as nested communities and the ability for the calendars inside of Karl to actually be subscribable from products like iCal or Outlook. And one of the features I'm really, really excited about is the new Yammer or Twitter-like discussions that will be happening in Karl. So let me show off. This is the new UI for Karl. So here's the community listing. We've got nice subdued colors. We can actually see here responsive design. As I make the page wider, we get more columns added to the page. And this is the improved people listing. So the top black bar is very much like your global navigation, kind of as if all out of the Google Plus experience, where the more global tools are available, such as the communities and the people and the feeds. And so if we go into a specific community, we'll see the other tools are still available to us, the blog, the wiki, the calendars. And we're still making it very easy to edit, not a lot of buttons, not a lot of overly complicated options available for most users. So adding a new blog entry is just as simple as clicking the Add Blog Entry button and putting in the various data for your blog entry, kind of like we did in the Alfresco demo. We can put our own tags on the items, and other users can also tag our content. So if multiple people tag the content with the word demo, the little brown tab at the end will actually show the number of people who have tagged the item with that specific keyword. It's very easy to upload images from the post itself. We'll just choose an image for that. And then we can actually send out an email alerts, which is more that email integration feature of Karl there. It's very easy to use. And once it saves, we can see we've got our new blog posts with the tags available. So the search has also been simplified. There's no longer 2 search boxes in a community. We've got the simple ability to choose between just this community or all of Karl, and we can limit down the search based on the type of content available. This is the new Twitter-like interface where we can actually discuss the piece of content that we may be navigated to. And if we want to talk about the piece of content we're on, we can actually use the hashtag this, and it will automatically link back to the post we're currently viewing. So really convenient for having ad hoc discussions or just discussions that may not fit within the scope of, say, like a full email or needing a full threaded discussion about the content. We've got the ability to follow people inside of our Twitter-like interface and have direct messages. Some of the features you kind of expect from like a Yammer or Twitter-like service. So some of the pros and cons of Karl. It's definitely one of the easiest to use of the tools we've evaluated today. It's very lightweight and fast. It typically can be deployed without any kind of web caching in front of it. It has a very, very nice backend to deal with from a developer standpoint, so it's easy to add in new features as needed. Some of the downsides, though, it's a little harder to install, at least in its current state. It doesn't have a double-click installer like Alfresco and Plone have. And it does have a very simplified workflow. Items are typically public or private, and just as the communities are public or private, you can make single items public or private as well. So we don't have the ability to create very complex business process modeling like we would in Alfresco, or even Plone has the ability to do a lot of that business modeling that you may need for larger organizations. But I would definitely give Karl a good, thorough look. It's got a lot of potential, and I think it's just the ease of use makes it very easy to deploy into almost any organization. So just a quick rundown. We went over Alfresco, Plone, and Karl. I think Alfresco fits in a lot of areas where you need to have office integration. Maybe you've got a larger budget and you need to do some pretty advanced business process modeling. And these are the kind of areas where Alfresco is definitely going to excel. Plone, probably one of our favorites here since we do a lot of Plone work. It does have a very easy to use interface. It does have very powerful workflow, but along with that comes a lot of options. Now, Plone does have a very, very impressive security record. Its fine-grained controls have definitely paid off over the years in its security record. And then Karl, which is, I think has a big advantage for very large organizations that are distributed across even multiple continents. It's very easy for them to collaborate in real time with the quick and easy communities. So I hope you all enjoyed this today. If you guys have any questions, don't hesitate to ask. Here's my email address. I'm CalvinHP on Twitter. And if you wanted to use the hashtag Sharepoint Alt, I'll be watching for questions that are going on there. And you can always visit our website at www.6feetup.com. I appreciate you staying with me today during this webinar. And like I said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to ask.